If you have a drug charge here in the state of Florida, the worst thing that can happen out of that drug charge is it turns into a drug trafficking charge. And a lot of you get a drug trafficking charge and you don't even see it coming. That's because drug trafficking is based on weight, okay? And if you don't realize that a certain weight triggers the drug trafficking laws in Florida, and drug trafficking laws come with mandatory prison. That's what makes them so serious. They're first-degree felonies. I get all that. They have high bonds. But the main thing is every single drug trafficking law in the state of Florida carries mandatory prison. And that's not like, well, gee, John, can I get an ankle bracelet? No. Gee, John, can I get probation? No. What about some home confinement? No. It is mandatory prison. Well, what about 6 months in jail? No. We have our ways around it. So mandatory is like, depends on who you hire and what kind of motions we file and what kind of defense we put up. But I want to talk to you today about the Campbell case, because this guy flies in from Colorado, and I don't know if this is going to shock any of you, but agents are waiting for flights from Colorado. Why? Because we get a lot of weed from Colorado, so it's like a no-brainer. They're always monitoring flights from Colorado, okay? It's just that way. And part of the monitoring process, folks, just to let you in on this, is that a canine will kind of go sniff the bags from Colorado. And a sniff was performed, and guess what? 2 bags that were identical didn't pass the sniff test from the canine. And that means not that they're gonna pull those bags right away, okay? Because they didn't have a warrant to go into the bags and do some things, but what they did was they waited to see who is gonna pick up these bags. I've seen this a zillion times. And sure enough, Campbell, in our case for today, picked up these 2 bags. They pulled Campbell aside and said, look, dude, we're gonna take a look at those bags, but you can go home. So they got Campbell's identification. They let him go. It's not over just because they let you go at the airport. The reason they let him go is the reason they let everybody go, because they're going to go to a judge now that they know these bags alerted from a canine, these bags belong to Campbell. Now we're going to get a search warrant from a judge and see what's in the bag. They got a search warrant. They go into the bag, and there's like, between the 2 bags, there's like 50 bags of cannabis. It weighs 35 pounds, 70 pounds, somewhere in there. A trafficking in cannabis, folks, is 25 pounds. So you get a far less severe case if you were caught with 22 pounds of weed. But these folks were caught with like 30-something pounds of weed, and that's a mandatory prison sentence, and Campbell went to prison. However, at trial, Campbell told the jury, I was out in Colorado and I thought I was buying hemp, and hemp is pretty cheap. It's like 50 bucks a pound or whatever. And if it were weed, it would have been $1,000 a pound or whatever. So I thought I was buying hemp. I had no idea I was buying illegal cannabis. Jury didn't buy it, and Campbell went to prison. He files this appeal that we're talking about right now. Now on appeal, what Campbell says is, I can't stress this enough, folks. And I've done some other drug trafficking videos, and I've said this before, I'm gonna say it till I'm blue in the face. Please get a scientist involved to deal with the weights and the measurements of the lab, because we do not trust that they have weighed these things properly. Weight is what matters in a drug trafficking, okay? Because when you look at the 3 things that get you in trouble, that send you to automatic prison on a trafficking, yes, number 1, you possessed a substance. Yes, that substance was illegal marijuana, but 3, it weighed over 25 pounds. That's the weight limit for trafficking in cannabis. The state has to prove that there's over 25 pounds. Now, do you remember, I snuck this by you, but now it's gonna be really important. There were like 50 little baggies in these 2 suitcases or duffel bags, whatever they were. Guess what the state did when they testified in court? The lab analyst in court testified that she only tested 1 baggie that was 25 grams. She tested 25 grams, and it takes 25 pounds to get a trafficking case. Why did they do that? They did that because Florida law, since like 1978, has said you don't have to test all the weed, all right? We know what weed looks like. We know what weed smells like. So you could test a little bit of it, and if the rest of it looks and smells like that, you're going down for the trafficking. But Campbell raised a good point. Campbell's like, those days are over, folks, because now what looks like illegal cannabis, what looks like illegal marijuana, may in fact be perfectly legal hemp, which is what Campbell thought he was buying to begin with. Campbell was in prison, sent away to prison, and the court said, because there are changes to Florida and federal law legalizing hemp, that requires law enforcement, in this case, to chemically test each of the 50 individually wrapped packages of the green leafy substance that was seized from the luggage to establish the threshold weight, the 25 pounds. And based on those recent changes, finding that hemp is legal, the Campbell court said, you know what? You're 100% right. We're throwing out your trafficking. This legalization of hemp, folks, it just has all these ripple effects throughout the entire drug law here in Florida. And this is one of the first cases I've seen where the hemp law is interfering with drug trafficking cases. This is the right decision. This guy went to prison, they yanked his prison and said, you're not guilty of drug trafficking, you're guilty of a simple felony possession of marijuana, which would, it's just over like 20 grams. It doesn't take that much to get into felony zone. I want you guys, if you ever have a trafficking case, you have to be very, very suspicious of how the state intends to prove their weight. Way back in the day, I started this in 1993. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement runs the laboratories that do all the weight and do all the testing. FDLE's labs were required to test positive for the drugs all the way up until the trafficking weight. So let's say they had 70 pounds here or 35 pounds here. They do not have to test 35 pounds of weed. They have to test 26 pounds of weed under the old way that they used to do it. Once they tested positive for 26 pounds, their job is done. They ain't going to all 37. You don't have to prove all of it. You just have to prove above the trafficking threshold to send somebody to mandatory prison. This Campbell case is an excellent case. I'm glad it was thrown out. However, what is interesting to me is that one of the things the court said was that everybody who testified, none of them could tell the difference between hemp and weed. What's fascinating about that is that not even the canine was trained between the difference between hemp and weed. So when the canine alerted on this stuff and they got a warrant, I think these dogs need to be retrained, because I think in the future, you're not gonna be able to get a warrant to search this stuff. If the canine can't tell if what's in there is legal and the canine can't tell what's in there is illegal, I think you need to get a new dog. You can't go to a judge and say, let me search through somebody's private garments and everything else because my dog may or may not think that there's something illegal in there. They need to alert that every alert is a definite illegal substance. And it was interesting that they didn't even address the canine issue here. Maybe that's just because they didn't have to get there, because the weight issue is so important, folks. We could go on and on about this, but I thank you for watching. If you got some drug issues here in Central Florida, I've been doing it since '93. I hope you'll give our office a call, because I think we can help you out. But if you're just watching for some knowledge, I thank you for watching as well. Take care.